Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor podcast. Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor. Hi, guys, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Devon Taylor podcast, where we have guests from all around the world tell their unique and powerful stories to not only allow their voice to be heard, but for you to leave feeling inspired. Today's guest is someone whose life work beautifully connects the science of healing with the spirit of nature. Our next guest is a clinical herbalist, author, and international speaker whose 40 years in natural medicine bridged the worlds of Tibetan medicine, botanical science, and mindfulness. He's one of the rare Western practitioners to study directly in the Himalayas, blending that ancient wisdom with modern integrative care. Through his telemedicine practice and teachings, he empowers people to practice what he calls clinical level self-care, a deeper understanding of how the mind, body, and environment work together to restore balance and vitality. So I'm happy to welcome to the show, David Crow. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to interview you. I've had a lot of different guests on this show, but as you sent over your bio and the information and all the work that you've kind of dabbled in, I'm truly intrigued. So I kind of want to just start first with what drew you to study Tibetan, and I couldn't say it, so I kind of kept it out of the intro. But you could probably correct me from Ayurvedic, okay, medicine in the Himalayas. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Well, I was one of the first Westerners to study Chinese medicine when it came to the U.S. I graduated from the first acupuncture college in 1984 and was practicing Chinese medicine in San Francisco when I started meeting some Tibetan spiritual teachers and got interested in Tibetan Buddhism and was very interested in exploring the roots of classical Asian medicine more. I had a license in acupuncture. I had a background in studying and practicing Chinese medicine, which is acupuncture and herbology. But what came to the United States at that time was not really classical. It was really westernized and very simplistic kind of Chinese medicine. So I was really interested in the origins of where these traditions came from. And because I had been meeting Tibetan lamas and some Tibetan doctors also, I decided I wanted to go study Tibetan medicine. And so I closed my clinic after a few years in San Francisco and just moved to Kathmandu. I didn't know what I was going to find. There weren't any schools. I had no contacts with anybody. I just decided I was going to go on this quest and I was going to find a teacher of Tibetan medicine. And within a week of landing in the Kathmandu Valley, I had found my teacher and the only translator in the entire country who could translate Tibetan medicine into English.
Wow.
So I had a very, I guess you could say, kind of predestined or karmic situation happen there. And I became Dr. Ngawang Chopal's only Western student for many years. I lived in Nepal for several years, went back and forth, ended up taking groups of people there, and had a very classical internship where I would walk through the rice paddies every day across the Tibetan community of Bodhanath and go to my teacher's monastery, and I would sit down with my translator and I would study Tibetan medicine. And he would give me these teachings from these old scrolls that he had carried out of Tibet. And he would tell me stories and we would make formulas together and we would see patients together and so forth. And so it was a real classical internship and something that was unique. Even then, there were virtually no Westerners studying with Tibetan doctors or Ayurvedic doctors either. So I was fortunate to have a classical internship, and this relationship with him went on for many years. I also met Ayurvedic doctors when I was in the Kathmandu Valley, and I ended up spending a total of 6 years coming and going, and had a total of 10 different teachers. 9 of them were Ayurvedic doctors because it was more common there. But after that, I moved into other areas of work. I started getting into botanical preservation projects and sustainable agriculture and production of herbal products, and ended up working with a lot of people around the world in different projects for economic upliftment and so forth. And I also made six extended trips to India after those 6 extended trips to Nepal, and I did that to uh, study botanical medicine further and Ayurveda further. So that's a quick overview. Basically, I went to the Himalayas because I wasn't satisfied with the level of teaching I received in acupuncture college in California when it first started. And I was fortunate to have this really traditional kind of education that came out of it. And that took me into all kinds of new directions. And I'm still a student and I'm still practicing. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. I love your story because it feels like a lot of your movement are, I guess, as you're going through learning these new techniques and meeting new people, like it was almost like it was just like guided, would you say? Because I mean, you ended up almost on the other side of the world and, learning these ancient techniques from, like you said, you had no connections. What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What was that whole process of just like kind of going with the flow?
Well, I had early inclination for this kind of knowledge. And I attribute it to the fact that my father took the family to Greece when I was a child. He had an interest in Greek mythology, and he went and taught English at Athens College. And this was back in the uh, 60s. So my early childhood memories were actually the mythological sites of, of Greece, temples and caves and these kind of things. And that wasn't a normal upbringing for, a kid from Southern California. So when I came back to Southern California, I was kind of different. And I ended up having a lifelong interest in other cultures and and the spiritual traditions of other cultures, other religions of the world. And that somehow took the form of an interest in botanical medicine. And I was interested in botanical medicine even as a young teenager. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing that was happening in the United States then. So uh, there is a belief in many uh, indigenous cultures that if a person has a strong interest in something at a very early age, and it ends up uh, taking them in a clear direction through their entire life, that it probably has some links to a past life. And so I think that there may be some of that, or else it was just purely coincidental. But I have always followed this path that included a lot of synchronicities, like the synchronicity of meeting my teacher in Nepal. But if I look at all the major events where I studied in different places with different teachers and did different things, there was always a very strong element of synchronicity, as if there was this kind of karmic um, propensity or a kind of destiny that was there. And so I've always had a sense that there was something like that that was underneath all of this, because looking back, it's actually pretty unusual what happened, where I went and the people I met and the good fortune that I had. A lot of people would like to do these kind of things, but it doesn't all come together. And it seems like for me, it's all fallen together a step at a time at every phase of life. And I feel very blessed by that. I've had incredible good fortune to meet so many teachers, both in the botanical teachings, the medical teachings, and the spiritual teachings as well. So I guess there's a kind of destiny or a karmic element to all of that.
I love that. Yeah, and even how it connects to your childhood. How old would you say you were when you were visiting the structures in Greece?
I was there 5, 6, and 7, age 5, 6, and 7. So those were early
Wow,
childhood memories. They had a big impact on me. Basically when I came back, uh, in my childhood, I was already spending all my time in the library studying all of these different cultures. So,
that's beautiful. It reminds me because I have a 10-year-old that I adopted him when he was, I believe, 6, and he has an infinity towards natural disasters, but weather and just like Earth in general, just planets. Um, a part of me feels like that is, part of what he's supposed to do something with that, figure something out. So any way that we can cultivate that, I'm happy to, because I want the kids to kind of be in their purpose. And it just sounds like you were guided, at a very young age to be in your purpose and carried it on into what you're doing now.
yeah, beautiful. I think it's incredibly important that kids see the world, especially in our contemporary culture in the US. Uh, Kids don't have any contact with indigenous cultures, really. I mean, except for some of the remnants of indigenous cultures that are here. But I know that when kids get an exposure to the world, that it really opens their eyes, and it's really healthy for them. So I think that's kind of the basic thing that happened to me was my dad had an interest in other cultures, and he instilled that in me, and it's influenced me tremendously. So I think it's a very healthy thing to do, to meet other people from other cultures when you're a kid.
I think it's super important. I kind of want to go into your experience a little bit more. Was there a defining experience in your journey that shifted your perspective on what true healing means?
Well, there's a whole bunch of topics in that, and the first question is, what is true healing? And I would uh, answer that in a variety of ways. I mean, are we talking about perfect health physically? Are
I
we
would say I would say more on the mental side of life. Like, because to me, at least, when I'm speaking to you and when I've read about your work and what you're doing, I feel like you've mastered a certain essence as far as how to take life on and not necessarily be so struck down by life. And I think a lot of people that may listen to this episode may not have the tools or may not know, that they're hurting or even need any kind of healing, mentally or emotionally. So
Mhm. Yeah, well, these are very astute comments. Thank you. I mean, first of all, that you took the time to research who I am, do the background check, and second that you have that awareness of the people in your audience. But what I can say along those lines is something that comes from uh, my clinical practice, and that is that many times people are faced with a health crisis and they need to learn to face it and to work with it on many different levels. And so, if I were to answer that question, what is true healing? I would say that it is in the context of spirituality, really. The, s- one of the ways that I could frame this. There is a Tibetan Buddhist image that is the focus of healing, and that is the medicine Buddha. And the medicine Buddha has a long history in Tibet, and it has many different forms in other cultures as well. But it's a deity that is visualized and invoked and meditated on and has a mantra and all of these kind of things. And I think that this image, or the concept of this image, I should say, addresses your question perfectly because it has many different levels of meaning. And the simple answer is that there is an outer medicine Buddha and an inner medicine Buddha and a secret medicine Buddha. Okay. And so the outer medicine Buddha represents the physical body, and it represents the healing of the physical body, and it represents, the doctor and the good fortune to have a good doctor and get medicines and to cure the disease of the physical body. But the inner medicine Buddha represents the inner energetic landscape of our body, which is the prana body. Okay. And this is the inner landscape where tantric meditation is done, where internal alchemical processes of like, working with the chakras and the kundalini and qigong practices. There's this inner landscape of the body as a container of energy. And that's an aspect that's represented by the medicine Buddha also, that there is healing that happens at that level. And then there is an ultimate level, which is called the secret medicine Buddha. And the secret medicine Buddha, I think, is a good place to answer your question. And the question is, well, what's the secret medicine Buddha? And the secret medicine Buddha is described as being our own life force, our own prana, our own chi. And that life force is what emanated into the body from the cosmos at the moment of conception. And it what grew the body, and it what keeps the heart pumping, and it's what is keeping us breathing and metabolizing, and the body is doing a quadrillion things every single instant, and it's a profound intelligence that is doing everything for us all the time. And so we work with the outer forms of this energy when we are doing physical healing, and like plants have this kind of prana and chi, and nutrition and food have it. Or we can do various healing exercises, meditations, or qigong to work on this kind of prana body level. But the ultimate healer, the ultimate level of the medicine Buddha is said to be our own enlightened nature, our own prana. Now, if we take that idea and go back to an early conversation that I had with Dr. Chopal, he said, you know, illness is like the shadow to the body. Wherever we go, there is always this shadow of potential illness and suffering that's there. And it's always inherent in having a body. And the ultimate healing, the ultimate level of healing, which is your question, what is the ultimate level of healing, is enlightenment. Okay. That's the goal of Buddhism. Now, that is also the goal of virtually every other spiritual tradition, but it's called all these different things. In Vedanta and the Vedas, it's called self-realization. Ayurveda and other aspects of the Vedas, it's called moksha, liberation from bondage. And it's called many different things, but it is an ultimate spiritual goal. And it represents complete transcendence of all suffering. Now, that's a big subject. It's a big question. Well, what is it? And how do we do it? And it is unique to classical Asian medicine that it is so well articulated that there is a unique spiritual goal, an ultimate spiritual goal. And this is actually one of the major contributions to human spiritual evolution is that at a certain point in time, the world's religions changed. And In Asia specifically, the focus of the world's religions became reaching an ultimate state of consciousness. Okay. And the traditions that came out of that were all contemplative and meditative because the emphasis shifted to finding transcendent inner peace, transcendent existence, transcendent consciousness, all these things, finding it inside of us, you see. And that started about 2,500 years ago. And I think it represents a really big step in human evolution. But that's also what my teacher told me is that the medicine Buddha represents the doctor. The medicine Buddha represents the power of the plants. The medicine Buddha represents, all of these different things. But ultimately, it's the power of the body to heal itself. And ultimately, the body is perishable and it has this shadow of sickness and suffering that's always there. And therefore, the medicine Buddha also represents, just like all the Buddhas represent, or just like all the deities, the gods and goddesses of every religion everywhere, they represent an ultimate state. And so I think that's one way to answer your question. But I did start another thought, and that is that many people come face to face with this challenge when they're very sick. And I've heard a lot of people say, cancer has been my greatest teacher. And therefore, what we see is that healing doesn't necessarily mean that we fix anything in the body. It might be too late. But Tibetan medicine also states this very clearly. They say we may not be able to cure the disease in this lifetime, but we can pull the root of it out of our mind stream so that we do not take the seeds of those karmas into the next life. And that is also a kind of ultimate healing. And that's where, when people are faced with mortality, they frequently have a spiritual awakening and their life takes on a completely different purpose and meaning. And the healing process becomes very profound and spiritual. And they undergo tremendous transformation in their relationships with others. They end up, cleaning up a lot of things and saying a lot of things that need to be said and basically preparing ourselves for death. And that's what that transcendent state represents. So I hope that I touched on it clearly enough.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you brought up a few things that even I wanted to touch on because I've heard the word enlightened a lot. And I'll even be vulnerable right now. I've heard it as in a way that you're not enlightened enough to have a conversation with me, or you're not enlightened enough to understand where I'm coming from. And so for me, when I hear enlightened, there could be like a triggering aspect on my end because I feel, well, you can do only so much to try to get to a point of being okay with, your body, your mind, your spirit, everything. But when you're challenged with the idea that you're not open to becoming enlightened, it feels restraining a little bit in a sense. And so I'm glad you said that because my initial question was how do we know that we are striving towards enlightenment? What kind of steps or what kind of processes would you see someone taking that is working towards enlightenment? I don't know if that made any sense.
It makes total sense. And once again, it's a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah.
So first of all, what you are describing is really not related at all to the subject of ultimate transcendent consciousness. What you're describing is actually kind of a derogatory use of the word. Okay, you're not enlightened enough. That's not the same subject. Okay, so when we're talking about enlightenment in a spiritual context, we are asking questions that people have been asking for thousands of years of what is it? How does it manifest? What do we do to attain it? Now, introducing some words here can help us understand, because if we were just to look up the word enlightenment in Sanskrit, for example, there's 30 different words for enlightenment. And if you look at the word enlightenment across all of these different traditions, and it's not just classical Asian medicine either. I mean, this is in Sufism, the mystical sect of Islam, and there's the mystical sect of Christianity. They were having these experiences of transcendence also. So if we look at the word enlightenment, we find that there is a lot that has been articulated in different lineages, but then we find that the different lineages are describing, on the one hand, very different approaches and different accomplishments, and at the same time, there is this kind of universal accomplishment. All right. Now, if we do a little evaluation of the words, we can learn a lot. So in Zen Buddhism, for example, there is um, the word kensho. That means catching a glimpse. Okay. We catch a glimpse in meditation of a transcendent state, but it doesn't last, it wears off. Okay. But then there is another word, satori, which means a full awakening, where a person is in meditation or maybe not in meditation, and suddenly something happens to them. What that is can be very individual, but it tends to be that a person sees the nature of reality very clearly. And in the Vipassana tradition of Southeast Asian Buddhism, these experiences are classified according to different levels, that we have different levels of insights into the nature of reality. But Buddhism is somewhat unique because it is so based on understanding our own consciousness as opposed to merging into God. But I think they're actually pretty close together. But in the stages of Vipassana meditation, there are all of these different levels of meditative absorption that go all the way up to very deep states of samadhi. And there's another word that's very important here. Samadhi means a deep kind of contemplative state. And there are stages of samadhi. Some stages are just the mind is very still. Some stages, the mind is very ecstatic. Some stages, the mind is so absorbed in contemplation that the self disappears. All right. So we have these words then, samadhi and satori. And the more we study these words, the more it starts to come into focus. Another one that's really important is moksha, which I mentioned. That's really the primary word in yoga and the Vedas to describe the ultimate goal, the enlightened state. Moksha means liberation, but there's another translation which I like in particular, which is emancipation. Moksha means emancipation, and emancipation from what? Well, they describe it perfectly as well, and they say emancipation from bondage. Well, bondage to what? Bondage to our senses. Okay. Emancipation from bondage to our senses. So imagine that we are not in bondage to our senses. I mean, we can just start with that as kind of a contemplation. What does that actually mean to not be in bondage? It means that we have a very different relationship with our mind and our body and our senses to the world. And this is where we start to see these other meanings of enlightenment. For example, um, in Buddhism, one of the names of the Buddha was Tathagata. And Tathagata means one who has gone beyond. And that tells us something. Gone beyond what? Well, gone beyond the suffering of the world. All right. So enlightenment also means that we can be in the world but be beyond its suffering. And I think that's pretty relevant nowadays. Tathagata also means not just gone beyond, but they make it very specific and they say, gone beyond the suffering of the world and someone who has crossed over to the far shore of existence. And so in all of these traditions, everyone's talking about leaving the world. Everyone's talking about a state. It doesn't mean necessarily leaving the world physically right now. It means that the mind is free of attachments to the body and the suffering of the senses and all of these kind of things. And then we see many different correlations with Taoism also. In Taoism, the ultimate goal is to merge into the Tao. Okay, and that means that we become immortal again. Well, what is the Tao? Well, the Tao is the flow of emptiness of the universe that we came from. So Taoism is very much based on where we came from, how we emerged from formlessness into form, and how we now extricate ourselves from form and merge back into formlessness. But we do it consciously and not just dragged along against our will and we're suffering because we don't want to go. Okay, so there's all of these ways that we can understand that word enlightenment, but it means that we are basically free of suffering in this world. And it also means that we have cut the connection with all the karmas that keep bringing us back. This is a big theme in all the Asian spiritual lineages, is that an ultimate goal is not to come back, okay, not to keep incarnating over and over again. Now, I don't know about that. That's a personal question that I have about, is that really true? And that's the starting point for all of my studies. Is I always pose these things as questions, and I say for a lot of these things I don't really know, but I do think that if we study these topics, that they are very enriching to help us understand life and to help us to grow spiritually, because there's also all of these things that begin to emerge if we start to think about, well, what does cutting our attachments to the world actually mean? You say, what does transcendence of the world actually mean? Well, it means that basically it's like the ultimate stress reduction and it's the ultimate relaxation. And if we are in a state of ultimate relaxation, then we are um, fully present and the heart is full of spiritual qualities. And we are expressing our enlightened nature, our luminosity, and therefore we have become fulfilled as a human being. And that is how we help people the most, is by being our spiritual essence as much as possible. So that's kind of well, there's another long answer for you.
I love it. I love it because it's giving way more context to even the meaning that I thought, I took away from your explanation of what enlightenment was, and even trying to relate it to my personal experience with that word, and knowing now it has several different meanings, and
Many meanings, many meanings,
right.
and many experiences. The human spiritual experience is vast. It goes all the way from ecstatic states, all the way to deep trance, all the way into visionary entheogenic experiences, all the way into samadhi that is so deep that the meditator forgets that they exist. There's a vast range of spiritual potential within our consciousness, or even more basic, we can say there's a vast range of consciousness states within ourselves.
Why do you think a lot of us don't access it? I want to also say, like, I don't feel like we feel like we can.
A lot of this is neurological and social. Okay. If you grew up 1,000 years ago in a village in the Amazon, you grew up with ayahuasca. Okay. You were brought up learning how to have interspecies communication in altered states of consciousness with plants and animals. all right? That's just who you were. And there wasn't any uh, effort involved. And if you grew up in, you know, tantric Tibet and were around yogis and teachers who were teaching these things, there's a pretty high likelihood that you would spend your life doing that. So we are very disconnected from these things culturally. And because we're very disconnected from these things culturally, uh, we have lost a lot of, I guess you could say, the broader context of these traditions. You see, Tibetan Buddhism is a highly sophisticated and broad system of meditation practices. And Tantra from India, Hindu Tantra from India, and Taoism from China, and shamanism from all over. All of these things are coming to the West, have come to contemporary America, but they have come completely out of their cultural context. And in the older traditional cultural context, people just grew up with these deities all around them. The rituals and ceremonies, the offerings and the prayers and the holy people that were always coming and going, and the teachers and the gurus, all of these things were all part of culture all the time. And the plants and ceremonies and the medicines and the vision quests and all these things were part of culture all the time. But now we don't have that. And we also have a thirst, a hunger for that connectedness that all of those cultures represent and all these practices represent, but it's come to us in very fragmented ways. And we are a fragmented culture. And furthermore, neurologically, we are not the same species as people 1,000 years ago in these cultures. Okay. People 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, in indigenous cultures, their brains were totally different. Their bodies were totally different. And I've heard very interesting stories from spiritual teachers about things they knew about their lineages in the past, about how it was really easy to meditate in the past, but now it's really hard for everyone. And that's natural. And it's that way because our individual mind, the flow of our thoughts, the individual mind stream is intimately connected energetically to the collective psyche of humanity. And the collective psyche of humanity is intimately connected to the biosphere of the earth. You see, these are all three levels of the same thing. The biosphere of the earth created the human psyche, and the human psyche is manifest in each individual's mind stream. And so now what we have is that the biosphere of the earth is very disordered. And it is disordered because the human psyche is so out of balance. The human psyche is very ill collectively. Our collective consciousness is very, very ill. And that's destroying the biosphere. And since the collective psyche of humanity is intimately part of the biosphere, the more we destroy the biosphere, the more we destroy our own minds. And therefore, it's virtually impossible for most people to meditate now. Now, part of that can be explained, in more practical terms, which is just that we have these mental habits that always want to check our emails. And we have all of this noise around us and all of these concerns, and life is very complicated. Life is extraordinarily complicated compared to 1,000 years ago. And so our minds are full of many worries and many troubles and many concerns. Our nervous system is really different than it was in the past. And the earth is very different than it was in the past. And the human psyche is very different than it was in the past. And so now what we have are these remnants that are coming to us, just these pieces of these old cultures and pieces of these teachings. And it's very difficult to reproduce these things because bigger container for all of it is gone. That's why it's hard to meditate.
I would concur. I have a very hard time meditating. It's something that I've never really been good at. Um, but for people like me, how can we start to reconnect and not be so disconnected from the world?
Good question. Now, one of the fundamental ways that the people in the past used to do this was they would go into retreat and they would withdraw from the world. And this is something that I find is very valuable. In certain times in India, for example, there was so much collective interest in spiritual practice that society was threatening to fall apart. And various, maharajas and kings and emperors in Asia, you know, had to encourage people to be householders, stay home, have families, stop going to meditate in the forest, in the caves. You see, there was so much interest in transcendence and in spiritual practice that there had to be a new model because the original model, which was really inspired by Buddha was a renunciate and he taught renunciation. And people were so inspired by this that an entire population developed very rapidly of renunciates, men and women. Well, society can't operate if everybody's a renunciate, but it produced a lot of holy people. So then the next phase of Buddhism in India was that there was, the householder meditator, the householder yogi. And this is where we see a lot of things that have come to us now. This is a very strong aspect of uh, the Sikh lineage, Sikh religion, is that they teach that spirituality and family are inseparable. And a man should not become a renunciate. He should practice, you know, with his wife, the spiritual practices and with the kids, that it should all be integrated in the family. But when it comes to practicing meditation, then we ask, well, what are we trying to accomplish? Well, that's a fundamental question. Are we trying to quiet the mind? Are we trying to observe the mind no matter how active it is? Are we trying to analyze the body sensations very deeply? Are we trying to visualize a deity? Are we trying to enter into some samadhi state? I mean, there are many teachings and many practices and many kinds of meditations, and the goals are very specific. But I think that when a person says, I have difficulty meditating, generally what it means is that they have not actually spent enough time sitting still for the nervous system to calm down. Now, I can share a personal experience of this, and I can report that even in Chinese monasteries where I spent some time, the monks and nuns have trouble with it. Okay. So I was invited to attend a classic Zen retreat uh, at a Buddhist monastery in Taiwan. And I was authorized to go in with um, the monks and nuns and, given a robe and instructions and all of these kind of things, even though I wasn't ordained. And everybody arrives at 5 a.m. on day one, and the opening ceremony starts, and everybody comes in and sits on their meditation, their so-called cushion, which is actually more like a brick. And then everybody sits there, and we begin meditating for 18 hours. And on that first day, everybody falls asleep. And then as they fall asleep, that's why they have a police monk or a police nun who walks around with a stick and taps you on the head or gives you a loud whack or whatever. And it's discipline. Sit up, wake up. But everybody's tired. Why is everybody so tired? Well, everybody's tired because they've been working out in the outer world, doing all their responsibilities. So the first day is terrible. Everybody's exhausted. Then second day, pretty much the same thing happens. Everybody comes in, we do the ceremony, and then everybody pretty much falls asleep, but people start waking up a little bit more. Then on the third day, people are waking up more. And then meditation starts to happen on about the fourth or fifth day. Now, that's after 4 or 5 18-hour days that you have to sit still in order for the brain to actually, shift down. And by the time you get to the 10th day, then you can come in at 5 in the morning and you can sit in the meditation posture pretty much for 18 hours and stay awake. And in those 18 hours that you are sitting there, then you will experience a whole range, a whole multitude of states. You will experience excruciating pain. You will also experience the body dissolving into incredible bliss. You will also experience states of intense agitated mind. And you will also experience states of very, very peaceful, tranquil mind. Now, that's why it's important, if you are interested in meditation, that you do it consistently in a retreat situation long enough to actually let the brain recalibrate itself from modern life. But the problem is that many people are not ready for that. And many people are not ready for an ayahuasca journey either. And if people are not prepared for an intensive encounter with themselves on a meditation cushion, or an intensive encounter with themselves in a mushroom journey or ayahuasca journey, then they can damage their psyche, and people can have psychotic breakdowns because it's an overload for the brain to process that much neurological information, that much intensity, because sitting on a cushion for 10 days is really hard. It's intense discipline. But that is how the old yogis used to do it. Like, my first teacher of Tibetan Buddhism was a true Himalayan yogi who practiced for decades in a cave alone. Okay. And that is something that people can't do anymore. And so that was what I found deeply inspiring and intriguing about him, is that he was like a different kind of human being from a different age who actually had the power to do that. And most people cannot. Now, I actually had a different teacher. He was a Japanese abbot. He ran away. He was an abbot of a monastery in Japan, and he ran away because he didn't want the responsibilities. He wanted to be a full-time meditator. And I met him living and meditating full time in a garage in Los Angeles. I heard about him and I started going, and he would meditate all day and all night. And so I started going and meditating with him. And he told me many times, people can't meditate like this. Okay. This will make people crazy to meditate too much. So it's a balance then. How do we approach meditation? And the number one transition that I have found that's applicable to everybody, that always works, is get into nature. And if we get into nature, then we start to discover all these old practices that are just part of nature. Like, there are these practices that are taught where you sit at the beach and you listen to the sound of waves. If you sit at the beach and listen to the sound of waves, you can go deeply, deeply into meditation really quickly. Or if you listen to a flowing river, listen to the sound of water, that can put people into meditation very, very quickly. And so many of the meditation practices actually came out of people who live very close to nature, and they learned these practices from nature itself. That's the main obstacle, is we're trying to meditate while we're living in these really difficult conditions socially. But in nature, when it's really quiet and we're closer to the cycles of nature and the sounds of nature, meditation starts to develop naturally.
I love that. And yeah, I mean, to even hear that, I know it's 18 hours of meditating, so it's much different than, if I were to sit down, but to even hear that they struggled with the meditation portion, gives you a little, or gives me a little bit more of like I can do it if I dedicate the time, dedicate the energy. And yeah, I mean, it's a scary thought to hear, that to think that, as you're going through the process of meditating, or even because I've turned down an ayahuasca journey. I'm not, to be quite transparent, I've done, I can't remember what it was, the frog medicine. I
That's
don't know if
pretty
you've heard of it.
intense. Toad venom.
So I did that, had a pretty intense, session with it. And when ayahuasca was presented to me, it just, it's like, you know what? I think I'm going to take a little break because I don't know if I can do this. So when you said that, it totally resonated with me on that level, that, yeah, sometimes it can be quite scary for us because our brain is not wired, especially in the environments that we're in, to take on such mental, loads, or, neurons firing in all different cylinders. But I kind of want to go into the concept that you've introduced, and kind of have you explain that for us. Um, you have introduced a powerful concept, clinical level self care. If you can first explain what does that mean, and how is that different from common self care practices we see today?
Good question. Thank you. I first started using that term about 10 years ago, and it was because of my clinical practice. I have been in clinical practice for 40 years, and much of that was in a hands-on clinic doing acupuncture and herbal medicine, and later Ayurvedic treatments with, warm Shirodara, the warm oil cascade over the head, and aromatherapy steam, and all kinds of detoxification processes. But now it is telemedicine. And the term clinical level self care became apparent to me because people need self care. And we have a basic concept of what self care is. It means, have a healthy diet, get good rest and sleep, do some exercise that's appropriate. Don't hurt yourself with too much detox and repeated coffee enemas and stuff like that. Self care. Uh, how do we care for the body and the mind? Okay, well, that's one level. Now, clinical level means that we frequently have to interface with doctors and drugs. And we need more knowledge. We have to understand more physiology. We have to know more about how the body works. We got to talk to doctors. We have to make decisions. And that's the majority of my practice for the last several years, is really complicated questions and really complicated cases and complicated decisions. Okay, so I'll give you one simple example um, of what clinical level self care means. And that is that anybody who comes to me and they're on a prescription medication or several, I will ask them, doctor, did the prescribing doctor educate you about what these medications can do potentially, side effects that they can cause? And the answer is almost always no. And then I ask the patient, have you educated yourself about them? And the answer is almost always no. And so we have millions and millions of Americans who are taking prescription drugs that the doctors never tell them what they're going to do, what to watch out for. People just take it on faith that, oh, this is going to lower my cholesterol. But they haven't researched it themselves. And so my role then is to teach them clinical level self care. And one of the most basic exercises that we do in clinical level self care uh, is I say, all right, so you're on this statin medication for your cholesterol. The doctor didn't tell you what it's going to do, and you haven't researched it, but you're describing symptoms that I know can come from that drug. So let's look at this. So, uh, this is on, telemedicine on Zoom. And so I do a screen share and we go to drugs.com and I plug in the name of the statin and say, okay, here's atorvastatin and let's take a look at what it does. Well, what do you know? What a coincidence. When did you start to get this pain in your joints? All right. So now what we do is we connect the dots. And so a real big part of clinical level self-care is understanding the chronology, the step-by-step evolution of your health. And nobody does that. Nobody does their own health history extensively to see what caused this and then caused that. And the doctors don't do that. Nobody's got time for that. So when we do this exercise, I always tell people we're going to look for a few things here. Number one, let's look at this long list of these really serious side effects that can come from taking this statin. All right. And the main things you're going to see right at the top is that it causes intense inflammation in the musculoskeletal system and it affects the brain and is known to cause cognitive decline. So we've got millions of Americans on statins to lower their cholesterol, and it might be related to the epidemic of dementia, you see. Now, when we go through that list, one of the first things that happens is that patients get freaked out. They go, oh my God, so many toxic things can happen. And, I say, is the doctor monitoring your liver enzymes? No. All right, so doctors aren't even following the prescriptions that they're giving. So when we look at this, we look at a couple categories of information. The first is, are there any side effects on this long, long page that are new since you started? That's the clue. If you start a medication and then you start having side effects, you better make a connection. So when people don't research it, they don't realize that what they're feeling now could be coming from the medication. And the doctors don't even make that connection. And they say, oh, well, okay, you go in and you've got inflammation in your musculoskeletal system. I'll refer you to a rheumatologist. They don't look at the connection between starting statins. Okay. And so then you go to the rheumatologist and say, "Oh, well, looks like you're in the early stages of this kind of, uh, arthritic inflammatory condition. So now let's put you on some pain medications." All right. And then they'll start to destroy the stomach. And then you got to go see the gastroenterologist. And then he's going to put you on the proton pump inhibitors. And the next thing you know, you're like a typical American patient on 6 or 7 drugs. And all of that could have been prevented if you studied the drug as a educated patient and you made a connection with the symptoms that are starting to come, or you saw that, okay, I have a pre-existing propensity to musculoskeletal pain and now it's gotten worse. Okay. So that's a real clear, simple definition of clinical level self-care. And in that role, I'm more like a medical advocate. I don't control their medications. I don't change their medications. I just give them education, and mostly, I don't even educate them personally. I just say, let's see what they say in over at drugs.com, and there it is, all the pharmacological information about the potential side effects and the dangers. Now, when we do this exercise, we uncover extremely valuable information, and I've actually caught a couple of situations where the person said, uh, I am being prescribed this medication and that medication. And I said, no, wait a minute. Let's do a little drug-drug interaction research here. And we go and we look at the drug interactions between those two prescriptions. And the doctor should never have prescribed those drugs together. And I have seen cases where pharmacists will not fill prescriptions because they say the doctor should not prescribe those drugs together. You see, so we have to be very educated, and doctors are too busy. Pharmacists usually do a lot of this, but I do it as kind of a educational advocate, you might say. But I also include in this concept of clinical level self-care, understanding the blood tests. A lot of times people don't know that you can actually order your own lab tests and get them yourself. You don't have to do it with a doctor. And you can monitor your own markers. If you're on a health program, you can watch your cholesterol come down. You can, track your blood pressure yourself. There's all kinds of things that people can do that are medical. It's really using natural. It's using allopathic medicine in a more empowered, educated way, and we don't throw it out. We don't reject it. But what we do try to do, and this is a concept uh, in this kind of medicine, is I ask a basic question, especially if a person's on a lot of prescriptions. I say, well, what is medically necessary? That's one term. What is medically necessary? And frequently people are on way more things than is medically necessary. And so then the question becomes, what are the lowest number of drugs that you can be on? The least number of prescriptions, and what is the lowest dose? And so this is a journey that patients frequently take with me, and we work with the doctor. I don't do this. I educate them about the questions to talk to the doctor about. And they go in with these terms like lowest dose of least, the lowest dose of the least number. Okay. They go in with these terms and they say, that's what I want. I want to get off as many drugs as possible. I only want the ones that are medically necessary, and I want the lowest dose of that. And when people go in with simple information like that, doctors usually pay attention. And when you go in and you've got that page printed out from drugs.com or another website like that, and you've highlighted all the symptoms that you've gotten since you started your antidepressant, they will usually agree. Yeah, all right, you didn't have those before, and now you've got them. Okay, it's probably the medication. Now let's start tapering you off. All right, so doctors are increasingly willing and interested in getting people off of medications because they're learning that a lot of this stuff is really dangerous. So that's my role, is just to give people information, knowing that it will be reviewed by doctors. So I just help people think things through. I help them make decisions about the medications. I help them make decisions about, surgical procedures, things like that. And I help people, ultimately where it all leads to is I put together an herbal program for them to complement what they're doing. And that's the ultimate goal, is to reduce the medications and to switch over to natural medicine as much as possible, or to use natural medicine as much as possible to avoid the medications.
It's no coincidence that before you, because the two guests that will release before this episode were doctors, kind of speaking on the same thing. Um, just how their angle was big pharma has a big influence on the medical industry. What's taught in the schools, what's distributed out as far as medications go, and it's almost like a pipeline of what the doctors are taught at school is you see a symptom and you prescribe a pill, and it's been an uphill battle for them because they're trying to kind of open the eyes of all the people that they're working with to see there's other options and there's other ways to be treated. And it's to me it's crazy how far off Western society has gotten when it comes to healing ourselves. But I asked them this question that I'd love to ask you and get your opinion. How do you see the future of medicine evolving, especially as more people look for natural and integrative solutions?
Well, it's evolving very quickly in some very positive ways. Tremendous research is coming out about plant-based medicine that's being studied at a biological, biochemical level. I'm about to launch an extensive course on detoxification that is based on this research. And what we find is that modern science is really starting to appreciate the active ingredients of the herbs like curcumin, or bicolin from Baikal skullcap. And so there's a very scientific evolution that is happening, and I respect that a lot. But what I do with it is I take that information and I link it back to traditional uh, classical Asian medicine. And so if I see something like curcumin is anti-inflammatory for all these conditions, then I look at that through the lens of Ayurveda and say, well, that's why people use turmeric every single day. And if I hear something about, Baikalin from Huangqin, then I know that Huangqin Baikalensis, okay, is one of the primary anti-inflammatory herbs in Chinese medicine. And it is now available in all these different forms. So you can make a tea from a traditional root of a Chinese herb, like Huangqin. You can boil it into a tea, very classical, like, 5,000 years ago. And then you can add tincture, the alcohol extract to that. And then you can take um, the bicalensis, you can bicalin alkaloid just by itself in that. All right. And so now we have the ability to make these full concentration formulas, full spectrum formulas, where we have the whole plant and all of these different extracted forms, all the way to the extracted active ingredient, all the way back to the whole root. And that's never been possible before. And we also have this whole spectrum of information going all the way back to the classical formulas and the classical concepts of clear heat and toxins, all the way into this very scientific terminology about, it switches the phenotype of the macrophages to anti-inflammatory from pro-inflammatory. We've got the entire spectrum now of modern and classical and allopathic and traditional. Okay. So it's a tremendous time in terms of evolution of our knowledge and a tremendous time in terms of access. We can now access any plant from anywhere, any herbal tradition, anywhere in the world, we can get it virtually. Okay. Now that's the positive side. On the other hand, the trends of environmental pollution, socioeconomic hardship, difficulty getting good food, stress, contamination of food chain and water with things like microplastics, endocrine disrupting compounds, heavy metals, particulate matter from wildfire smoke. This is the breakdown of the biosphere. And the projections about where all of this going is truly horrible. The cancer rates that they're projecting for the next 10, 20 years that are associated with a just total overwhelm of the environment with toxicity. So it's a real paradox. It's a real contradiction that we have so much available to us that we could do so much healing and so much good, but it's becoming less and less available to more and more people. And people are just becoming increasingly overwhelmed with stress and toxicity. So it's, a metaphor or a snapshot of what's happening in society in general, that we are reaching higher and higher levels of incredible potential, realization of our potential on many, many levels. And at the same time, the foundation of it all biologically is just deteriorating. So, both are happening, both are true. And unfortunately, natural medicine really is a luxury for the wealthy more and more. I mean, even healthy food is, you know. And so, under those circumstances, what I see happening is that we have this incredible opportunity to do all of this healing. But there is an equation that I discuss as part of clinical level self care that affects everybody. And the equation is real simple. The more resources you have, the more you can work on your health. Because I talk to a lot of people who they have serious health problems, but that goes hand in hand with serious economic difficulties. And that means that they can't even buy healthy food. And if you can't buy healthy food, then you're not going to be able to have a herbal pharmacy, you see. Now, some people can afford an herbal pharmacy and healthy food, but they can't stop working these incredibly long hours. So what I tell people is we work at your level, what you can do, what modifications can you do, what small changes can you make in the diet, what one or two herbs can you bring in to make some teas. We always have to work at everybody's level socioeconomically, but the reality is that, for the patients that I work with who have the money, I will sometimes say, "Look, the best thing you can do for this condition is just go check into a world-class medical spa somewhere." And they'll come out 3 months later and they'll be totally cured. And that cannot be done under stressful circumstances on a limited budget and, poor food. So it really is an equation between, the resources that people have. And I saw this very, very clearly studying medicine in Asia. It was a big existential philosophical question. What is the role of these medical systems in all of this poverty and pollution? Is one of the real motivating factors. You asked what was a turning point. That was a big turning point for me. Recognizing that we've got these incredible medical systems, but in Nepal, in Kathmandu, everybody was sick all the time, including myself and my teacher of medicine. And it's kind of like we've got all these wonderful traditional formulas, and you can't breathe the air, and the water's full of parasites. You see, these are fundamental questions that we have to ask and answer in every case in clinical practice. Good topic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering that. I also want to ask you too. Now, with that being said, what's your hope for the next generation of healers and practitioners?
Well, my hope is that more and more people are going to get interested, and that is happening. There is a tremendous amount of interest in natural medicine now. When I first started studying herbology, there was nothing. You couldn't buy products. Now it's a golden age of natural products. There weren't any practitioners offering these kind of treatments, and now you can get them everywhere. Okay. So, on the one hand, there has been this incredible uh, positive growth in these fields, but there's also a downside to that because a lot of this has now moved over to social media. Okay. And so now what we have is a lot of people who are influencers who don't really have clinical background or training. Okay, so I really make a distinction between people who have graduated from an accredited medical school and have a license to practice medicine, okay, from internet medicine. And I've been talking about internet medicine and social media medicine for quite a while because people are getting hurt. And so a lot of people who come to my telemedicine practice have been hurt by social media medicine. And the main thing that does that is there's a tremendous overemphasis on over detoxification. So I have patients who have lost their gallbladders from gallbladder flushes. I have patients who have done serious damage to themselves from too much cleanse, cleanse, cleanse. That's not balanced. It's not healthy. And so therefore, what we need is to take this interest, which is coming a lot in the younger generations. There's a lot of uh, people now in their 20s and 30s who are really getting serious about herbal medicine. But it has to be put in the context of real medicine. Okay. Now, there's different levels of herbal medicine, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with learning the level that we could call um, folk medicine or uh, home pharmacy. That's great. Anybody can do that. You don't need a medical degree to help your friends with chamomile, you know. But the problem is that when people know a little bit, then because our healthcare system is so falling apart, our healthcare system is becoming so dysfunctional that if you know a little bit of herbology and you know a little bit of natural medicine, then people are going to come to you asking for help. So another thing that I see that's happening with this trend is that people are trying to help people without enough medical education. And I don't just point the finger at social media with this. I was in that case also. I was in that group also. Because if you go to acupuncture school and you graduate, or you go to naturopathic school and you graduate and you go into opening a practice, you don't know how to practice medicine. Okay. It takes a long time to learn. So that's what's really necessary. The interest is huge. It's exploding and it's great and it's wonderful, but be careful and balance it and don't focus everything on detox. Okay. That's the main thing, is that everybody thinks that they can cure everything with detox. That's not correct. There's a big role for it, but you got to learn how to do it. So that's what I see is lots of good movement and evolution. It's a huge explosion of interest. But with all of these things, we have to keep in mind that herbal medicine, spiritual traditions, all of these kinds of things that have come to us, they come from very, very old cultures where people have been doing it a long time and now they're here. And we need to integrate them and work with them for a long time to really understand them. So when the people who are now starting to practice herbal medicine have been doing it for 40 years, then their knowledge will be great and profound and comprehensive. So that's what I think about it.
I love that you said that about the social media too, because it is a very dangerous place now, and a lot of people are posing as herbalists or practitioners that have been doing this for a while and have found the newest trends. I'm glad you touched on that a little bit because it is something that is prevalent right now that's going on with the boom of natural healing, coming back because I just naturally feel people are opening their eyes. Some people are taking advantage of it. And yeah, I think it's
Exactly.
it's safe to say be careful out there. But before I let you go, I just had a few more questions.
Sure.
I wanted to ask if someone could take or if someone could only take one principle from your teachings to live by, what would that be?
Wow. Uh, Medical, spiritual, both? Any preference?
I've been enjoying your spiritual take as well as the medical, but I really would like to hear your spiritual take
Hmm. Okay.
or
Well,
both.
okay. So I would say that the most basic thing that I can offer, if somebody were to say, "What's the essence of your spiritual practice?" I would tell them about how I learned to read pulses in Chinese medicine first, and then in Tibetan and Ayurvedic medicine next. And then I will tell them that after listening to tens of thousands of people's pulses, I suddenly realized I could listen to my own pulse. And then as I started listening to my own pulse, I discovered all of these teachings that I had heard about from spiritual lineages, and they were all there in my own heartbeat. And that developed into a complete system of meditation that answered the question for me only: what meditation practice works for me? And I found that the meditation practice that works for me is listening to my own heartbeat. But listening to my own heartbeat is not just listening to my own heartbeat anymore, because I know that listening to my own heartbeat is also being present with myself. And I know that presence is the energy of attention. And so I know that giving myself the energy of attention inwardly is healing. And I can feel that. And I also know that the heart beats because there's a spark of bioelectrical current, and that's called prana in Ayurveda. And that prana comes from the brain. But in the Vedas, it also says that that prana comes from God. And we can then go into all these dimensions where we find agreement in all the spiritual lineages that the heart beats because the entire universe is behind it, causing it to beat. And then we learn that life starts with the pulse wave going up, and then life ends with the pulse wave going down. And if the heart doesn't beat again, that's the end of life. And then we learned that the heart pumps the blood to the sense organs, and this comes from Taoism. And they call the sense organs in Chinese medicine, the five flowers. And they say the heart is the root of the five flowers. And when the heart pumps, it sends blood to the flowers that open when we wake up and we perceive the outer world. And then at night, we go back to sleep and consciousness goes into the heart. And when the heart stops beating, the outer world disappears. And therefore, we learn that the heart is pumping reality into existence one heartbeat at a time. And so I found all of these things in my own heartbeat and many other things. And it became a whole system of meditation that I've been teaching ever since. And we just finished a 2-year Sangha program. I had a group of students, and we listened to the heartbeat for an hour, twice a month, and studied all of these teachings about what is the heart medically, what is the heart spiritually, esoterically, mystically, what are all of these dimensions, how we can see our entire life from the first heartbeat to the last if we're listening to our heartbeat. Okay, we can see our whole lifespan. And how does that change our psychology if we can see our entire life, you know? So in this Sangha over 2 years, this group of people listened to over 27 billion heartbeats together. Okay.
Wow.
So that is my contribution to meditation practice. And to answer your question, if there's one thing that I would say is the essence, that's the essence of my meditation practice. And it is an integration basically of classical Asian medicine and spirituality.
Love it. And I'm actually going to start sitting with that a little bit. I don't know, something about that resonated with me. Maybe maybe is what I exactly need to start getting myself
Thank you.
into meditating. So thank you.
People
Yeah.
people find it easier than a lot of other methods.
Yeah, it seems like it could be because it's um I don't know, like when you said, feeling your heart is like almost like going inward. There was a certain phrase that you used that just really stuck out to me, and it kind of made it make sense. Why that would be the most comforting way to meditate.
Nice.
Yeah. Before I let you go, though, I do want to ask, where can anyone that wants to work with you, where can they go? What's your website? Are you on social media? Anything that you would like me to leave in the show notes? Um, if you don't mind
Mm.
doing that now, that would be great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for asking the opportunity. So people can find me at the website crowconsultations.com. CROW, my last name Crow, consultations plural.com. And on that website, there's a page that describes clinical level self-care and a scheduling button if people would like to consult with me. And I also have courses, including that complete listening to the heart course. And I also have regular free events where we gather for meditation or I give lectures and we talk about various subjects. And that's the best place to contact me, the best place to see what my offerings are. And I have also offered quite a lot of educational courses over the last 10 years over at the Shift Network, theshiftnetwork.com. And if you just go there and plug in my name, you'll see that there's all these courses on herbal medicine, which are also on my site. And there's a lot of courses on aromatherapy that I taught over there when I was working with essential oils a lot. And between those two sites, it pretty much covers the archive of what I have created over the last 10 years. And that's how people can find me. And thank you again for the opportunity to mention that.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for being here. I truly, 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 truly had such a great time interviewing you and learned so much within the time we had. And, I feel like we could have gone even longer. I just don't want to keep you all night, but you definitely, I think, will help a lot of my listeners gain clarity on the next right step or the next right move. And hopefully that is working with you. So thank you
Wonderful.
again.
Thank you. Thank you for really excellent questions. I do podcasts fairly regularly, and most people do not actually study the person or take the time to go through and write out really good questions like you have. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I genuinely appreciate that compliment. Thank you. Yeah, I try to do my best, and honestly, when you came across to me and reached out, I definitely was intrigued. Or your publicist, and just getting to know people on a deeper level, or at least being able to tell your story a little bit, is an honor to me. So it means the world. It feels like I'm in my purpose. So thank you for saying that.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, until next time, I will see
Until
you
next.
guys on the next episode. Thank you so much, David, again, and
Okay. Thank you so much.
I will see you guys all later.
Hey guys, it's Icarus here.
And Amelia.
And I'm here to tell you if you'd like to join our brand new adventure. Go to devontaylorauthor.com to learn more.
And check out the cool items like the new bucket hat.
Yeah, and so much more. See you guys there.
Stay true to yourself, don't quit.